you ready?
One,
Action.
two, three.
Right. Okay. So, Carolyn, good to be speaking together with you again. It's always a pleasure to reconnect and continue our chats.
Me as well.
So, I know that we've just had a little pre-talk, and I was thinking back about, in fact, our first talk we had in this series, what we call it, and we were talking about these cycles and grander cycles and cycles which come from endings going into new beginnings, and of course how that incorporates what we would call the cycle between birth and death. And just this morning I looked online, and I put a question: how in general each year, what is the average number of people who are dying or passing away on this earth per year, in whatever reason, all across the globe? And the average number was 60 million, which is quite surprising because, I've never Googled that amount before. And it's, of course, to incorporate the whole human species and all events and natural causes, unnatural causes, tragedies, or whatever, encompasses everything. So it made me, obviously, I think it puts in perspective that this movement of birth to death and everything in between is a huge continuous movement. And so we're always in these cycles from a larger scale to a smaller scale of always beginnings, ends, and everything in between. So it seems to be the motif of what incorporates human existence.
And I think it also incorporates all living existence. I'm thinking of the garden, the grass right outside and the trees. There is a cycle that every living thing goes through, and humans are only one piece of that cycle. So every mosquito, every blade of grass, every flower, every tree is doing that at a different rate of growth and in a different scale of time. And I believe that that is the nature of the living world, no matter where you look in the living world. And the humans, we are just a part of that. And as cultures, we tend to forget that and think of ourselves as at the top of some scale of existence, and are the important ones and the rulers and the babysitters and the caregivers and the governments and the gods. And that's wrong. So I personally like to take my information from the natural world and try and understand how it works, the world that is under my feet, that I walk past every time I walk outside the house. What's happening there, and how does it match my own existence? And the more I look at that, the more I realize it matches absolutely on every level. Even though as societies, and maybe even as a species, we tend to forget that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am fascinated by those connections, that as above, so below, the whole notion of the pattern of existence being identical as it plays out at every single level of existence and life. And then what that means about the nature of reality, I mean, I kind of push it all the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I understand the nature of this real world that I am part of? And in what ways are all the different lives parallel? And I include in life those things we call not alive, like rock or magma or air. It's all part of this living web. So when I can think in terms of that web, then this coming and going is a coming into life and going out of life is a perfectly natural phenomenon. And why are we surprised? And if it were not so, if each of the living things on the planet did not have a beginning, a middle, and an end, we would be overrun by stuff, including human stuff, in one season. You know, we couldn't exist that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think of, I'm thinking about my own death, I can't think of it as a tragedy at all. It's perfectly ordinary and natural. And what I have to do to deal with all of that is to try and understand the larger picture so that I fit in that. And then my own death will be, just one piece of what's happening all the time, even as we speak.
So it sounds like you're trying to naturalize death, because it seems to me that our so-called modern societies have done the opposite. They've unnaturalized it, and especially with the medication, pharmaceutical industry, what's been popularly known these days as the illness industry, is that they, we have this sense that it's unnatural to die and we should keep on living, which is again the mantra from modern technological societies, to keep on living. It's the modern kind of holy grail, which is, completely unnatural and seems to alienate us and further alienate us from a natural system. So in these times, perhaps we're being shown signs that we need to recalibrate by naturalizing ourselves again with the world we are in. This is our reality. Whether people debate whether reality is virtual or simulation, that's really getting away from the point. We are in a life experience. These are the natural laws of this life experience. So therefore, isn't it hubris that is it hubris that we're trying to, readapt those laws rather than naturalizing and sinking in with them?
Well, it's a form of denial, and denial is a psychological problem. It's very unsophisticated and kind of stupid. So, and I watched this happen in real time when my husband had his last illness, and we went to the hospital, and the first thing that happened was the inevitable thing that happens in a hospital, is he caught the infection, the hospital infection. So he was in the hospital for 2 weeks while they didn't really deal with the problem he came in with. They dealt with the hospital infection and essentially killed him. So, and there was I, kind of helpless, but jumping up and down and yelling at people and trying to get help. And what I finally did was I illegally got him out of the hospital. And I did it AMA, which means against medical advice. And as a result, when he died at home a few days later, I got picked up by the police because I had, in their language, assisted a suicide. So, everything that implies about our lack of understanding and our kind of stupidity as a culture, it is horrifying to me. And I I insist upon doing it differently when it's my time.
So do you feel that this denial is on a individual and a greater level, a collective level as a species? Is this denial one of perhaps the reasons why we've got in this situation that we have done? Or is it perhaps a sign of the time that the denial is a sign that we are coming to the end of the way that we thought we could do things, and we've been obviously being told this is not the way?
I don't know. I think, there are those people who are more enlightened and those people who are more frightened, and they don't speak the same language. I think it is in the process of change, partly because what I notice is I'm not the only one saying these things. So there is change happening. The Western medical system is based on, from my perspective, and I get into a lot of trouble with all the scientists I know for having this perspective, but it's based on a system that is based on three-dimensional reality, on solid individual stuff in no context whatsoever. Space is empty from that perspective. And that's just wrong. I can hear people saying, don't judge, but I am judging. And I have seen it in action and seen the fear around it and the ignorance around it, and have paid for it. My husband died. He was very ill, and he was dying anyhow, but he died in pain, and that was not necessary. Also, if I look at it in an even broader context, I see that the denial is part of the process. The likelihood of everybody turning around in a week and saying, oh, we've been wrong all along, and this is another way of thinking about it, and then all being on the same page, that's not likely to happen in the world of us humans. So it's a process, and a very painful one. And, we're going through it. And when I look at who we are, you and I and all the people that we are connected to, I realize that we've come into the world at this point. We were born when we were born in order to have this very conversation and to do this very work of redefining who we are, where we are, and what we are part of. Because it's been defined for us for, well, who knows, 50,000 years. And it is, part of it is correct, and much of it is not. It's based on, I don't know, personal gratification and the law of whoever's at the top of the heap gets to say what's real. So we're trying to change that. And that, I believe, is the way human society works. As we go through these eras of belief system. And if you happen to be outside of that belief system, you are called, I speak for myself, called crazy, get, flunk classes in college because you're talking nonsense. It's radical, and it's different, and it also, in many cases, goes against the tenets of the institutions, like the church, like education, like the intellectual world. We're saying something different, and so we're paying the price for that. Speak for myself, I am paying the price for it, because it's very, very hard to be warmly accepted in general by my communities for the work that I do. And nor do I get paid for it.
Well, I guess we get paid in other ways. Going back to what you said before, I liked the way you said your people are either enlightened or frightened, and and they're both speaking a different language. Now you mentioned about the the natural systems, the land is important, and also there's the consciousness of how we understand that life is more than a 3D world. But there's many people who live very close to the land, and they have, let's say, more simplified comprehension. They're not interested in 3 or 4 or 5 dimension. They'll just want to work with the land. So, and perhaps they are less affected by all this chaos in the world because maybe they're more grounded by just being on the land. I mean, how do you see our relationship or understanding with the natural systems? How will that change, or will it just be going back to what we thought before? Or will it be an updated understanding of how to work with the natural systems?
My first answer is I have no idea. But my second answer is that there are many of us, and we're all somewhere on the spectrum of understanding. And we all, I believe, everybody has a finger on some aspect of it, because it is a multidimensional on many levels, both physical and ephemeral. There are multi-dimensions, and we each have our own particular talents in what of that multidimensionality we perceive. And what we need to do, I mean, I'm having this thought for the first time, is that we need to believe one another, as opposed to making teams. You know, if you believe in da-da-da, and I believe in da-da-da, that means that we're enemies. And so I have to kill you, or try to. That's our work right now, I believe. And ultimately, what is that? But it's learning how to love, as opposed to insisting upon being right, whatever that happens to mean to you. So, you know, you can avoid all the mind games of figuring it out by keeping on going back to the body and the heart, you know, the basics, and loving it, you know, loving yourself. I mean, that's the big difficult one for us humans and on the planet, is accepting ourselves and loving what we find there. And also recognizing that we're all in, you know, we're all part of what we have called God, whatever that means. We're part of the whole. And the whole is an intertwined web of many dimensions that is gorgeous. I'm thinking of Indra's web, the Buddhist image. It's this woven fabric of everything on all dimensions, all levels, all sizes, all time. And we're missing it because we're insisting upon our own particular little vantage point as being right and the whole thing. So I'm thinking on my feet big here now. So what it requires for me, as I think about this, is opening my heart. And as a member of our human society, I have also had the traumas, the family mess, the refugees, the suicides, all of that stuff has come along with me, family-wise. And a lot of my adult life has been trying to heal that, trying to see it, understand it, recognize how I have been affected by it, trying rising above it, try to pass on something gentler, hopefully more profound, and succeeding in some ways and totally not succeeding in others, and somehow letting that be okay.
I mean, I have faith in humanity and in the goodwill of people. And my sense is that, you know, the majority of people, most people, share those basic human traits of goodness and wanting to share goodwill and help other people. But yet we don't seem to see that, because I think especially our communication channels, especially the media and those owned by the corporate industries, are shown as the negative side of human life. They're shown as those small minority people who are, you know, do evil acts, they kill each other, they murder. And I think that's overshadowing the majority of people who are actually wanting to express goodwill and to help the fellow human being. And I think that's clouding our perception of ourselves as human species. We tend to think, oh, humanity probably didn't deserve to pass through these changes. You know, we need to kind of prune and clean and purify humanity. But actually, that's only a small part we need to clean. I think the majority of humanity are good-natured and good-willed. Maybe not always, maybe need a bit of, you know, redirection, but I think we're being programmed to focus on the darker side, so that it divides us. Mm-hmm. and it makes us alienated, because obviously if we feel that human bonding, we're much stronger, both both as individuals and on a collective energetic level. But because we see the negative, we're more manipulatable by other forces.
Exactly. We're kept afraid. And that, I think, is deliberate. And I wonder every day, who are these people who benefit from most of us being scared out of our wits? And where do they come from? Are they us? Are they from elsewhere? What's their program? And the older I get, the more I feel there is another program out there. Where it comes from, who's got it, I don't know. But, I watch my own family, who are all refugees, terrified and harmed, bodily harmed, when they arrived in this country. They were frightened by definition. And so when I look at where they came from, their lives, they came from ghettos. They were the subject of what's called pogroms. They were murdered. And so they grew up scared. And then they were able to get out of there and come to this country, whole other set of things to be afraid of. So I think ultimately it does come down to fear. And probably that fear is used not so much against us as in the interest of some kind of benefit to a small group of, I want to say, madmen, but also frightened people.
Carolyn, I like that phrase you used about there's another program going on somewhere with some people. Makes me feel like, or sense of like a virus program has come in and bring it back to nature. It's like an intervening species. Like, for example, if you have a species of bees in one country and another species come in from a different environment, they come in and they can interrupt the whole ecosystem because it's not their natural environment. And it feels like that a program, as you say, is coming in and trying to convince us this is a new program and the new way of thinking, but it's alien to our environment, to our natural systems. So it's as if we're trying to recalibrate to get back into sync with our natural systems, our natural program, the natural place of humanity in this world. Would you say something like that?
Maybe. I think, though, it depends on who we are. So we run a gamut, and it's not only on the level of internationality, I believe. I think it's built in. And we vibrate to a certain resonance, or we resonate to a certain vibration, I guess. And what I think is happening in the world now is that those of a naturally higher frequency are growing in number. The babies being born now are really different from the babies who were being born when I was having babies or when I was a baby. And they are having trouble because there isn't yet a match between the frequency of their surround and the frequency of their beings. And so we're seeing an awful lot of what they call on the spectrum behavior, and people who, and it's actually pretty much all over the place now, these disturbed, brilliant people who are world changers, but they're not grounded for the most part. Not everybody, but they're brilliant. And they're not fitting into society as they find it. Well, of course not. And they're not stable enough to create the new society, except for some of them who are doing it anyhow, stable or not. And so we're in mush time where, the threads have all gotten tangled and the weave is not clear. I think it's inevitable. If this is in fact what is happening on the planet, it's inevitable that we go through a period of mush. And that mush may be several generations worth before something gets stabilized and the weave can run clear.
Mm-hmm.
I see it a lot. I see it in my own family. I see it wherever I go. People who are brilliant, young people for the most part, who are brilliant and just don't know how to live because I watch them with my heart in my mouth because I want to protect them all, but they don't belong. They don't fit. They're both too smart and too stupid. And I believe, I look at it and I'm very disappointed, but of course it makes sense that that would be the case if we're trying to make radical change on whatever level that happens in order to save humanity and the planet. We need these new minds and new sensibilities, but it's not easy to be them. And none of us really know how to help them very much because it's new to us as well. I think that's what we're seeing, and we have to take it into consideration. The other thing that I feel has to be taken into consideration, and this is a very hard one for me personally to take, is that every single one of us, no matter who we are, has something to offer. That there's something that we perceive correctly, in balance, no matter who we are and what our lives are, that is needed for the whole zeitgeist. And, well, we've been taught to be competitors in the country of my birth, in any case. We're supposed to compete. If I'm right, then that means you're wrong. If you're doing it that way and I do it differently, that means I'm better or you're better. But that mode of perceiving reality and ourselves has got to go. But how do you do that? And who gets to choose? And then you try and be democratic. Well, oh my goodness. And then in your country, there's this fascinating, to me, establishment called the monarchy. That, Lordy, where'd that all come from? I mean, what an idea. So, we're trying to define who we are and to learn how to live on the planet amongst one another. And it's not easy.
Mm-hmm. It does seem like the whole epoch is having to resync and recalibrate and re-resonate everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you ask where the monarchy comes from. Well, monarchy comes in the ancient past from which warring families won the war, and which warring families then started to make alliances and kept their power. And now we have something which is ingrained, but it's ingrained in a certain frequency ecosystem. And that's, I think, what you're saying is that the whole reality ecosystem is now shifting to a different frequency resonance. And there's been talk about that for quite a while, but we never understand how to put it in practical terms. There's been a lot of talk from prophecies as well, ancient indigenous prophecies, as well as a lot of people understanding that our frequency is shifting. But of course, we didn't know the consequences on the outer stage, which we're seeing now, which is the mush. So yeah, it is that, and it's the world is going to go through it anyway. That's what I feel. It needs to go through it, and a lot of is going to get caught in the middle of that. But I say I think you're right. That the only way we can get through it is to be kind to ourselves, because it's a natural process which we've been taught to resist or fear or try to hold back. Like is it King Midas who tried to King Canute, who stood on the beach trying to hold back the tide. He was told that he was king, so he had the power of anything. So he thought, I'm going to stand back, I'm going to hold the tide back. Of course, he got more than wet feet. So I think perhaps that we've been programmed for so long that we are this intelligent species that can control our environment, that we naturally been kind of pushed forward to hold back these vibrational frequency changes rather than bending into the change and allowing it.
Yeah. And there's this dramatic thing that's been happening in your country since the 1960s, I think, which are these things we call crop circles, which are artworks on the grand scale made out mostly of grass and wheat. So they're not even permanent artworks, but they are great artworks. And they have appeared not only in England, but mostly in England, but they've appeared all over the world. And they're so scary to people that they have been put into this denial thing. It's astonishing, actually, to have this incredible phenomena happening in the farm next door and then say it's not real, and happening by the hundreds of thousands all over the world and get no newspaper coverage because people are so afraid of the unknown. I mean, I say because as if I know, because I find it astonishing, actually, that it has gotten so little positive press since I first was aware of it, which was, maybe 40 years ago. I've been following them closely ever since, and nobody's paying attention.
That's because the newspapers and the media have solved the problem. They have solved the riddle. They know that these crop circles have been made by Bob and John, two English farmers with a plank of wood, going around pushing down the corn with this plank of wood. I mean, and
one of them has been dead for the last 20 years or something.
Yeah. So they're still doing it. Bob and John are still going out there with the same plank of wood for the last 50 years. So it's the same thing. It's yes, this program is saying, oh, we've solved it, case closed, nothing to see over there, move along. And, and that's another thing, is that in this time, there's so many anomalies coming in. It could be crop circles. We can't explain them with the program we have. There's many other anomalies coming in, many other anomalies that are showing us the validity of other realities.
Right.
People have had near-death experiences, people have had psychic episodes. There's been a lot of intervention that had to be from outside our reality set. And to take the famous law of paradigm change, from Thomas Kuhn, is that when enough anomalies come into a system, the system can no longer deny the anomalies. It has to recalibrate the reality set, or the paradigm, which is an overused word, to then move to a new reality set that can incorporate the anomalies. And so all we're seeing now is like anomaly after anomaly in so many ways. And now the dominant narrative is just a laughing stock, this denial narrative. So I think it's a sign of the times that a whole new reality set is coming in, because we can no longer patch it up with these silly excuses.
Right. And these brilliant young ones are, I would imagine, seeing these things happen and taking a deep sigh of relief. Like, finally, their language is being spoken and everybody can see it. They're not crazy. They really did, I don't know, meet a so-called alien, or whatever it happens to be. That these things are happening to real people in real time, who have been told, who've basically been shut up. It's like, oh, come on, child, stop that. So it may be one of these things that takes a certain number before it tips. A certain number of people who say, yes, I have experienced that too, before the newspapers have to say, well, it's real. So that happens, it's not real, except to those who experience it firsthand.
or we get to a point where enough people will say, we are going to say that this is the new reality set, because, stuff, the newspapers, they're no longer part of our world. They can't, they're not valid anymore. So rather than us listening, because in the past, the model was that we outsourced our validity, whether to other kind of guides, to prophets, even, the past epochs was the epoch of prophets, of leaders, of Gandhis and Martin Luther Kings who could lead people. And now I think it's a time where we have to lead ourselves from the bootstraps up, because we're no longer in the energy of being outsourced, but rather the energy of being insourced.
Right.
And I think that's part of the vibrational shift as well.
Yes, and it is happening more and more on the part of young people who are basically looking at the cultures that they come from and saying, oh, the hell with that, and then moving off in their own direction, sometimes making a mess of things, but sometimes being our leaders, whether they realize it or not. And I'm thinking right now specifically of my favorite example of this, which is Merlin Sheltering, who is a fungologist, I guess it's called, and he is showing that the fungal level of our earth is the basic pattern. And we, in our academic circles, have sort of ignored them. They were kind of part of the botany department, but you didn't have to look. It was under the earth, this kind of mess. So he has brought this up, and to my great astonishment and delight, people are listening, and he's being picked up and encouraged. He's a young guy, and he's being encouraged to keep doing what he's doing. So it's all happened very quickly, in the last maybe 2 years. And that's where I see the hope, is young people like him who are looking at the world and seeing something different, and then describing it and seeing the metaphor in terms of how we view this world we live in. And I'm thinking, if it could happen in 2 years with this one young British fellow, then we may be okay. We may be able to get through this. So I feel like a lot of my own work, although I don't even think of it as work, is encouraging brilliant young people who are seeing the world differently, and feeding them and loving them and encouraging them in every way I know how.
Interestingly, you mentioned Merlin Sheltering. I hear is a fun guy.
Oh.
But actually, yeah, I mean, going back to the kind of the understanding of nature and fungi and the world underneath our feet, in in the ages past. Oh, you okay? Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm listening, even though
Yeah, that's a consequence of my jokes. I would never make another fungi joke again.
No, you can. I just should never take a sip of water. You're doing so.
But I was reminded of, like, in the past times, nature was seen as sacred and nature was worshipped, and there was nature deities and the seasons were worshipped. And that was a more kind of time of animism and the sacred energies in the nature around us. And then we went to a very profane time where, everything, science saw nature as, as kind of like rough in tooth and claw, as they framed it. And then it was nature was, something to be controlled. And then we had we industrialized nature, industrial revolution. And then nature's been seen as a commodity, which is now completely commodified, and all this so-called, taxes on nature. And maybe through this understanding of going back into the ground and understanding the life under our feet, like the life of the fungi and botany, perhaps you think that the new wave has gone from the sacred to the profane and back to the sacred nature of the natural environment.
Yes, and I think that one of the things that has made the difference is the movement from out of the opposite of patriarchy. What is it called when
Patriarchy.
matriarchy? Yes, thank you very much. So, the sacredness of nature was a female construct, or I mean, I don't know, I wasn't there, but it was not patriarchal. As soon as patriarchy and the church took over, then there were all these rules that got rid of that sacredness and made the feminine energies suspect and, called witches and burned them at the stake, got rid of them, and then ran the world by a very different set of understandings of how it all went together. And we're coming back. Personally, I want to see it to come back as a balance. It's not either or, it's got to be both. Because it is. These are two seemingly opposites, but they're part of the same phenomenon. So we're in that. We don't do it very gracefully or graciously, as I see it, but we're trying. And let's see how well we do it without dipping way over on some other side that then takes precedence. I don't know. We are an either or kind of culture, or we humans like that, or maybe we non-indigenous humans like to have this polarity, which gets us into an awful lot of trouble, I think.
Yeah, it's like we've had everything in polarity, the East and the West, and we've maybe it's kind of reflection of our own state of understanding our own minds, because we project the different hemispheres of our minds onto the world. Is it a kind of a say matriarchal, patriarchal? Is it intellect? Is it abstract or integral? And we've been swinging one to the other, whereby actually we have a capacity where we need to integrate the minds. I mean, both sides of the minds are working at the same time anyway. It's just that different dominant features come to the fore. So we are naturally an integral species, but certain part of the polarity comes to the fore, and then get thee behind me, Satan, and then try to dominate, and these back and forth. So we've been going through this polarity, but we haven't yet to come to the age of the integral. And perhaps that is what we're going into. I mean, Jean Gebser, the Swiss philosopher, said that he looked at the stages of consciousness, and and he marked it out from agrarian consciousness and the mental state, and then now the final stage is integral consciousness. So perhaps everything goes together. The way we perceive reality and the way reality is reflected from our participation means that an integral consciousness will be part and parcel of this integration of the polarities in a balance of the world.
Yeah, I hope so. And I see it actually happening on another level, which is in America especially. Every culture is here because they had to leave their places of origin because they were being killed there. And the result is that the generation that is now young adult are from everywhere in the world. And they are falling in love with one another. And they are having babies. And these babies are new in the history of the world, I think, because they're matches or combinations of gene pools that didn't know each other before. So I remember asking a young woman, gorgeous, gorgeous young woman, where she came from, because she didn't look like I couldn't place where she was from. And she said, well, my father is Punjabi, and my mother, what was her mother? Her mother was Colombian. And I immediately, my mind blanked, and I said, well, where did they meet? I can't quite see a Punjabi going to Colombia. I've never known an Indian who wanted to travel in that part of the world. And she looked at me like I was crazy and said, at work. And it was a perfect moment. And suddenly I got it. Of course. So this new generation is this wonderful indigenous mix. They're a whole new people. And my God, are they gorgeous to look at. And my God, are they brilliant. So that's why I put my hope, is on these sort of accidents of history that are creating a whole new realm of beings who are going to be they're the new people. And so hopefully racism will smooth over somehow, because everybody will be part of everybody. Yeah, and I'm a bit of a goody two shoes, because I see everybody coming out happily and dancing in a circle, which probably won't happen. But I think that the movement is toward that melange, that whole new gene pool that we will have.
Well, you said the phrase the force of history, nature of history. Maybe it won't be history that unleashes this. Maybe it'll be the forces of nature, because history is very much what we have imposed our story on to things. Mm-hmm. And perhaps now history is crumbling, because history now is like our borders. It was, a story that kept people apart or made us fear one another. But the forces of nature, we see it in the hurricanes and tornadoes. The force of nature is the human gene pool, the resilience in because there's a natural attraction within nature. And so I think, you said with this melange and blending together, that this huge force of energy coming through a different, through a species now not tied to the old stories or the old programs and the old racisms and their old borders, may be able to spread like wildfire after we've gone through this mushy period.
Right. And, I realized that in terms of this new gene pool being born, all that takes is one generation. That's fast. So I was with a family that I'm sort of a surrogate grandma for the new baby, who's absolutely gorgeous and brilliant. And his father is North African. He's from Morocco. And his mother comes from Scandinavian blood. And he's this roly-poly, gorgeous, with the brightest eyes you've ever seen, mix of these two completely opposite looking gene pools. And bright, oh my goodness, the whole new understanding of bright. So that's where I put my hope. And the fact that they're also physically gorgeous, I take great heart from, because it's like the joke's on us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that it makes sense that the ugly people in power, the powers that be, are always talking about depopulation and that, and wanting to depopulate the world, is because the force of nature is coming through the new incarnations in the world. And no doubt, the forces trying to stay into power, realizing that this magnanimous force coming in into the new human vessels, the human bodies, is like the tide that King Canute is trying to hold back. So all this silly artificial means of depopulation through various means, we don't have to go into detail, but we could be aware of the various means they're trying to do that, it basically is the false, it's an illusion, because these two energies don't mix. It's like oil and water. Oil and water don't mix. And so you're trying to do all these artificial methods of keeping something at bay, but it's not connecting because what's coming in is on a totally different frequency, and it's just going straight over. And that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's a vibrational phenomenon, and just these young people that I have met, and now the new babies that I'm seeing are they're born at a much higher frequency than I was born at. They're brighter than I am at the age of 9 months. And you can see it in those eyes. And that's where the hope is. I won't be around to see it unless I decide to come back because I don't want to miss the show. But it's happening. And I and you probably also are in the swing generation. And that's why I believe I'm here now. I believe in my own belief system, the soul makes a choice as to when to come in and where to come in, with some sense of what the task is for that particular soul, what the learning is and what the work is. And this is mine, is to actually help usher these new ones in and protect them and love them up in every way I can.
Well, you said you won't be around physically, but you have children and grandchildren, so there's a part of you that will be around, and so so I think that it's a natural, it's a natural progression that you are passing on things in so many ways. So there's something like we always leave our residue behind in ways, whether through what we've given to the world or what we've passed on. So I think you can be thankful of passing on some beautiful things to the world, Carolyn.
Well, some good genes. And some...
well, I mean, I think the only genes I'll be leaving behind when I go are my Levi's. So
that's a good one.
So, let's see.
Did you make that up on the spot?
On the spot.
Very good, very good.
Because I have no children, and so definitely won't have any grandchildren. So it just be my Levi's I'll be leaving behind. Yeah. So on the note of our genes, Carolyn, I think it's a hopeful note to end our talk on. So before we sign off, any last words for this conversation for anyone listening?
Well, I would just like to acknowledge them, whoever you are, and to encourage you. If any of this is inspiring to you, I'd love to know about it. Please feel free to get in touch with me. And I guess my something is, or just get in touch with me through you. And I'd love to know what you're thinking, whoever you are out there in the world.
So you're favorable to feedback. I'll leave a link to your website below if anybody wants to contact you through there. Or if anybody sends a note to me through my email, the few that may contact me, I will pass them on to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, and also just to express my admiration and gratitude to you for doing this with me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's heartwarming, and in this mush, as you so aptly put it, a bit of heartwarming is always a pleasure.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, my friend, be well.